Hey guys, what's up? It's Dane at ZIMM'S Guitars right here in Mesa, Arizona. I got a lot of guitars to restring, and this is one of them. So since I'm putting some strings on a guitar, I figured, might as well have some of these guys. It's got nothing better to do to come and hang out with me and help me restring this thing. It's older. It's Japanese, made in Japan. This is an Aria Pro RS Wildcat. So this is one of those late 80s, maybe early 90s shredders. And you know what? I think it's George Lynch from Dokken, right? Used to play these things. The strings on this are in horrible condition. There's only 5 of them. The bridge is all wacky. It needs polished up real good. I'm gonna try to resell this one. Made in Japan, and there is a pretty big market for these old, I'm gonna call this vintage. It's old enough to be vintage now. It's old enough to be a collector's item. And the 80s was such a great period. All these companies were making their own versions of the Super Strat. So I'm just going to temporarily stick a little whammy bar in there so I can kind of get to this. And I'm going to drop a little tiny bit of 3-in-1 oil on some of this right here, because if you strip these out, or if they're already stripped out, you're gonna end up in bad shape. I'm even going to try to throw a little bit on some of these. I know it's gonna make a mess, but the last thing I want to do is accidentally strip that out. And then I'm gonna take a old back plate off of a guitar, and here's a perfect one to use because it's already chipped and broke. So we're gonna set this underneath there. There we go. So we'll go ahead and we'll take these little locking nuts off of here. And these, I'm just noticing that they're tiny, and they're a lot different in shape than what you would see on a modern Floyd Rose. So we have to take care in not losing those. This guitar might be a little challenging, because we gotta shine this baby up. We gotta make this thing look as nice as possible. It's my job. I have to do it. I know that some of you guys got really tough jobs, and you're probably jealous of the guy that can hang out in a guitar shop all day and just restring guitars. And trust me, guys, I know I'm not about my job. I have a great job. So let's see, let me just cut some of these loose ends off of here. Get these old strings out of the way. Okay. Gonna need a tetanus shot after some of these. You do get jabbed with a string every once in a while. Ouch. Kind of hurts sometimes. But that is the worst thing that can happen, I think. Okay. Alright, we got all the strings out. That was easy. But what I always do is I'll take a wrench and I'll tighten these up. Don't over tighten them, just get them snug. Okay, so now these need loosened, and this tool works really good for this. But it's also the same wrench, you know, that I took the locking nuts off with. But it's a little tougher to get this wrench in here. It's just easier. This is such a great tool for this. Klein tools. Oh, wow! I bet you that was... These strings probably haven't been changed out in 20 years. You guys know the old car videos. This car hasn't started in 20 years. Okay? That's what's going on with this guitar. This thing hasn't been restrung in 20 years. It's probably been sitting in some auction house or somebody's basement or some warehouse. Who knows for how long. Okay, so next step. Let's plug the guitar in. Let's tap on these electronics and let's see if she makes any noise whatsoever. Okay, well, let's double check here. Okay, my amp is on. Oh, there we go. Ooh, the tone pot's bad. Okay. Yeah, so again, looking at this Floyd, there's no licensed by Floyd Rose. No markings on that whatsoever. Alright, so to get in here and check these electronics, I'm gonna have to pull off the pick guard. And these screws, you know, sometimes I can change these screws. These are black. You know, I might, maybe I could hit them with a little black paint. That might be a good idea. Because my goal is to shine this thing up, even though it's got dents in it. And hope that I have a customer that loves this old made in Japan Super Strat stuff from the 80s. That's the goal. You want to keep it as original as possible. But sometimes doing some small little things like, you know, repainting some screws and stuff, sometimes that helps. The pickup in this does look like a DiMarzio. As soon as I get these screws off of here, we're going to be able to tell exactly what we do have, and we'll be able to spray these electronics out, and hopefully we can get this thing functioning properly. Okay guys, here we go. This is the first look underneath here, probably since this guitar was built in the What am I missing here? What am I missing? Are these pickup rings holding it in? Oh, there it goes. Wow. It's freaking in here. Huh. Is it these screws holding it in there? God, just take more screws out. Pickup ring screws. Is it underneath the Floyd? Maybe that's what's holding it in here. And again, I said it in my last video, but big props to Dave's World of Fun Stuff, the original string change out luthier. Okay, come on now. Give me something. It is really, really packed in here. Got anything on there? No, nothing on there. There we go. Okay, here we go. Wow. Okay, look at this magnet right here. Just came unglued off the back of the pickup. So, what do you do about that? Well, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take a little dab of super glue, and I'm just gonna glue it right back down on there. So let's see here. That's all I can do. I think it should still work properly. This looks good. I mean, they're tight. The wiring looks good. Yeah, this pickup went straight into the wood right here. Crazy. So, you know, all I can do, I think, is spray these out. So I have a little cutie electronic cleaner, quick drying formula. Put your eye protection on when you spray it. And spray these babies out. It's kind of a weird design here. How that pickup is just sort of laying in there like that. Seems fine. Okay, this might be challenging. There's a little Allen head in there. And so this was loose. So drop a little 3-in-1 in there. Let that set for a minute. And put this thing back together. Hopefully I can get this back in here. There's wires and everything going everywhere. That was strange that the 4 pickup rings screw straight into the body, right? Have you guys ever seen that? I never have. But then I've never restrung an Aria Pro from the late 80s either. I do remember though, being the big George Lynch fan that I am, and the Dokken fan, I remember him holding one of these on the back of the Tooth and Nail album. And so George Lynch used to play these things, and I don't know if he played them live and stuff like that. I don't think I ever saw Dokken live back in the day. Okay, I think I'm gonna go ahead and put a little black paint on these screws just to make this thing look pretty. There we go. Good as you're gonna get right there. Okay, so great camera work, right guys? Painting those. Okay, so now what I do to kind of clean the frets is I got my fret guard. And I've got some 1000 grit sandpaper right here. And what I do, I just kind of clean the top of these frets off. So you lay your guard down here. And if I can get nice, and so you guys can see this nice and close. There we go. Let's try this one. Okay, let's try this one. So So this is what I do. Don't want to take a bunch of meat off of the fret. I'm just going to get the top layer of dirt. So can you guys see that? How clean that is now? Let's do this one. And this piece is a little tiny piece of sandpaper I've been using for a long time. Probably could get a new piece. And it would even be a little bit easier, but I don't want to take a lot of meat off of them. I don't want to get them to where they need re-crowned. I'm just getting that top layer of dirt off of them. And so you guys can probably see that it's cleaning up nicely and polishing them. So when you get a nice new set of strings on these, they feel super smooth. And it shines up the guitar, and people are not going to be like, dude, I think this guitar needs a refret. Now, most of the time, you'll see dents in these frets, usually under the G string and sometimes the B string, where because the guitar has been played a lot. Now on this guitar, I don't see any thing that looks like this guitar was played a lot. So somebody bought this guitar back in the day because they loved 80s metal, and this thing was cool, and yet they didn't play it very much. And it became abandoned. You guys know that something like 90% of new guitars, you know, whenever somebody goes to Guitar Center or Sam Ash or someplace, and they buy a new guitar, something like 90% of those instruments become abandoned. And that's sort of where me in a used guitar shop, that's why I end up with a lot of stuff, because you get a lot of abandoned instruments. Because, you know, it's not easy playing guitar. Once you get it, it's easy. But for a beginner, just starting out, sometimes the thought of playing a guitar is just as hard as if you were to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to learn how to speak Spanish today, or I'm going to learn how to speak French or Russian or something. That to me sounds very, very difficult. And that's how it is for beginner guitars. It's almost like, you know, telling them, hey, you have to learn a new language, you know, because we all took Spanish class in high school. And once we got out of Spanish class in high school, we couldn't say anything except enchilada and burrito and buenas, whatever, you know. Can't speak Spanish after 1 year of high school Spanish. And that's kind of how it is on guitar. There's YouTube videos about the hardest instruments to play. And you know where the electric guitar comes in on that? The electric guitar comes in on that conversation, or on that YouTube list at, you know, one of the hardest instruments to play. Like number one on the list, the hardest instrument to play is the electric guitar. So you get a lot of abandoned instruments like that. Okay, now I'm just taking a little bit of lemon oil, and I'm going to try to clean this neck, scrub this up a little bit. Some guitars come in and there's so much DNA on the fretboard, but this one's not too bad. Let me hit some up here. And then you just let that soak in for a few minutes like that. Okay, I'll go see if my screws are dry, and we'll put the pick guard back on. Okay, I think we're ready for strings. All right, guys, so today's string choice, Super Slinky 9s, my favorite guitar string. Big shout out to my Ernie Ball dealer. His name is Joey. And Joey is actually, I called him earlier, and he is touring the Ernie Ball Music Man factory today. I'm imagining he's getting ready for the NAMM show that's coming up here in June. First weekend of June, I believe it is, in Anaheim, California. So he's probably prepping for that a little bit. Ernie Ball is located in the Coachella area of Southern California. So Ernie Ball is actually down there, and they are, in the Coachella, Palm Springs area there of California, out in the desert hot springs, and he lives out in that neighborhood somewhere. Ernie Ball, I love the strings. They make good strings. They're super easy for me to work with. They have really prompt delivery. And I have never had anybody not love the sound of their guitar with a new set of Ernie Ball strings. Although you get some guys that are wanting the D'Addario strings. And once in a while you'll get a guy that wants elixirs. You know what's kind of weird about strings is I never get anybody asking for Fender strings or Gibson strings. So I don't know what it is, but Fender and Gibson, the largest manufacturers in the world, nobody comes into my store and asks for Fender strings. Now I have a good supply of Fender strings, but a lot of times they just kind of sit there. Guys want Ernie Ball, D'Addario. I get some guys asking for DR strings on occasion. We want this to lay flat. So I want it to be right in this neighborhood here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tighten these springs in the back on the claw. We'll just go ahead and tighten these down a little bit and then try to retune it. And sometimes this takes, 3 or 4 times to get this right, and sometimes you can get it really quickly. There's tons of YouTube videos on how to set up a Floyd Rose. So just play the guitar a little bit. Double check the tuning, give the strings time to stretch. If you pull on them too hard, they'll come popping out of here, so you got to be careful. A lot of times these little blocks in here, they get old and people over tighten them and they end up malfunctioning and end up flying out of there. So, you know, things can happen when you're setting up a Floyd. Things can definitely go wrong, but we've gotten lucky on this one so far. No major disasters have happened. So I'm just gonna play it a little bit, try to stretch these strings out, you know, nicely, not too rough on them, and then just keep tuning it a couple of times. And then eventually I'll lock these down and use the fine tuners here to do the final tuning on it. And then, you know, after tomorrow, the next day, you might even have to try it again. And, you know, sometimes it takes a little while to get a Floyd Rose really locked in nicely. Okay guys, I got it all tuned up. An Aria Pro from probably the late 80s, early 90s, and cool guitar, brand new strings on it, all shined up. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go buy a new guitar.